This all started last week when I put up a poll asking what are people's thoughts on electric motorbikes, and the answers were unresoundingly negative. I got responses like this: shit, wrong in many ways. I like the idea, but I like a motor to tinker with. And there was a couple of good points in there. People could see that they'd be good for motorsport, the noise reduction would be a good idea, and also they can be ridden anywhere, anytime. So why was I asking this question? Well, I had an electric motorbike, had it for about 18 months, and I loved it. I would class it as the best motorbike I've ever owned. It was this, an electric KTM Freeride E. It was the best bike I've ever ridden. I took it to motocross tracks, and it was the easiest motocross bike I'd ever ridden. I rode it to work. I rode it through the woods, I rode it everywhere. It was great. The big downside was range. So I got out my phone and put up a follow-up question. What is the reason you don't like electric bikes? And the response was pretty varied. No noise, no character, no soul, but the most important one was no range. And that was the exact reason I got rid of mine. The range was awful. I'd get 25, 30 miles out of it. That was literally going to work and back, and it would be 100% flat. So that got me thinking, could I find a bike to buy at an over 100-mile range? So I set about looking for one. There's two ends of the spectrum. There's these small city commuter bikes that do 50, 60 miles and do 40, 50 mile an hour max. Or you've got companies that are trying to replicate superbikes that'll do 150 mile an hour and have a huge battery of about 20 kilowatt hours. So they'll weigh 250 kilograms. There's no bikes in the middle that have a reasonable sized motor that'll do a comfortable 60 mile an hour and that will do 100 miles. You want something, I want something in the middle. So I just had to know why. And well, that leads me on to all of this. This is all my workings out to find out if it was possible to make a bike that would do 60 mile an hour and would do 100 miles. That was my goal. This is a very brief overview of what I found. I looked into the 4 top selling motorcycles with small electric motors. I then worked out the battery size along with the mileage they spec'd for each bike. From these two numbers, I could then work out an average watts per mile it would use. So from that number, I could then work out how big the battery I needed to be to make the 100-mile mark I was looking for. I then looked into batteries. I estimated I would need just over 7 kilowatt hours to do the 100-mile range. To do this, I could do it with 600 individual cells, which would make a 72-volt battery. This battery would weigh 27 kilograms. So I now know what size battery I need, but would it realistically work in a motorcycle? So I looked up the specs of a CBR 125R, a bike that would be similar in power to a 5 kilowatt motor. If I took off the weight of the engine and a tank of fuel, it would weigh around 105 kilograms. If I then added the battery and the electric motor, I would then come into just over the 130 kilograms, which is what the bike spec'd. So it would work. It would not be a stupidly heavy motorcycle. So in theory, we could make a motorbike that does 60 mile an hour and can do 100 miles. But I can't find one of these on the market. So I set about designing it. I started off with a battery and I decided that 2 batteries would be better than 1 big one. And I can make each individual cell this size, which is not excessively big. So I think this project's doable, to the point where I'm actually now looking for a 125 that I can strip out and retrofit a battery and motor. If there's anything you want to know in particular, then leave me a comment and I'll see if I can do any more later videos on it. If not, follow along for a bit more of a project.